So this video is basically a follow-up to some of the videos, the points that I talked about in my previous videos. So if I make references to things I talked about before over and over again, don't get annoyed. It's something that I kind of planned from a long time ago. Basically, what I'd like to talk about this time is why Japan is the way it is, and specifically why Japanese people are the way they are, at least in my opinion. So let me just start with this. Would you or wouldn't you agree that Japan is the place that has spawned a lot of the weirdest, strangest stuff you've ever seen? Everything from like those bizarre, over-the-top game shows to just so many things that you can like look up, Zuiikin English on YouTube or look up Chindōgu on Google. The list goes on of just bizarre things that you could find from Japan. And those are just kind of broad examples that anybody could look up. Me, in my personal experience, I already talked about some of the things that really shocked me living there. Number one was the story I told the boy who wouldn't open the door. And I also talked about, in a different video of mine, something called speed funerals, which the whole idea of which just shocked me on a basic level, and nobody around me really seemed to be upset about it or care about it. A couple other things. One that really shocked me was something that I saw called a hug mat. And what a hug mat is it's a mat you put on the floor, and it basically has two sets of footprints going this way and going this way. And the idea is you buy it for a married couple who no longer seem to know how to be affectionate to each other. So they stand on the mat, and there are instructions telling them to, okay, first you stand on the mat, next you hug your partner for about 5 minutes. Next, you say something nice about your partner. And when I saw that, and I saw this couple on TV actually trying it out, it just seemed to me to be one of the weirdest things. Like, you need instructions to be intimate with your wife. You need like an actual step-by-step process in order to actually, show emotion for the person that you're supposed to be in love with. It blew my mind. One other thing that really, I couldn't believe it. This was in Okinawa. There was something called, well, I don't know what it was called in Japanese, but I refer to it as a bunkhouse. So basically what it is you can imagine a one room for rent, right? Somebody rents out one room. But imagine if you take that room and you put another floor in the middle of it. So basically there's a high and a low. So basically now you're renting out two rooms. And there are people who would do that, who would actually live in that. And that's your apartment, that's your life. You're in a space which is the half size of one room, and all you can do is crawl into it, go to sleep. There'll be enough space for a bed, maybe a TV, a computer, and that's it. There's a communal bathroom, a communal shower, something like that. But the place that you live is like, it's almost like you're living in a dollhouse. I couldn't believe it. But people do that. People do it without thinking about, without being bothered by it. I guess that's what was strange to me. It really struck me how Japanese people, they would either treat themselves or they would allow themselves to be treated. It's almost like you are not you. It's almost like you, or the emotions, the things that are happening to you, it's almost like it's happening to a little doll that you carry around in your pocket. It's really, for me, it was really strange, and I really don't think that I'm the only one who thinks that. If you ever seen like any portrayal of bullying on any form of Japanese entertainment, be it movie, TV show, it'll be really strange because there'll be 3 or 4 people, maybe more, in a circle, picking on one person who's in the center of that circle, and that person just has this kind of, like malcontented look on their face, but they're not doing anything. A bunch of people will start, talking bad about them, pushing them, and that person's just kind of like, you shouldn't be doing this, but not actually doing anything about it. And that might sound kind of funny, but the strange thing is, I've seen that. I've actually seen that kind of thing happen in real life, to where a person is almost complicit, like they're almost playing their part in the bullying role. They almost like let themselves be bullied by someone else because that's the role they're playing at that moment. I've seen grown men, acting like they couldn't get out of that situation, like there was nothing they can do. And again, that goes back to that shikataganai, shoganai attitude that I talked about in my herbivores, my grass eaters video. So basically, why all of this? Why are Japanese so unemotional, or seeming like very detached from their emotions? That was something that it really took me a long time to piece together, because, like I said, some things like the bullying around, it seems like if you want to, you could do something about that. Or, a lot of the things like the hug mat, it just seems like if you have a heart, you don't need that, and everybody has a heart. So, are Japanese people just, automatons without emotions? Well, I don't think there's a human alive that doesn't have emotions. Of course they have emotions. It's just how they deal with those emotions. And the way they deal with it, it just runs along certain patterns. And it took me a while to piece up on this, but there's kind of a reason for that. Anyway, if I can get a quick plug-in for Josh Waitzkin. Josh Waitzkin, if you don't know who he is, he was the boy who was portrayed in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. He was this kind of a young chess prodigy, and he did really well for himself. He was never like the world champion, but he was a very strong player. I think of him as my personal chess coach because there was a game, Chess Master, for PS2, and it's got a lot of his tutorials. And anyway, he's a really great guy. He's a really worthwhile guy to check for information, because he teaches you many things, not just about chess, but about learning itself. Well, in reading and hearing some of his chess lessons, he brought to my attention there's 2 categories of thinkers, and he was using this example because he was talking about young chess learners, and I forgot exactly the terms he used, but basically he said there are entity-based thinkers and there are more dynamic ones. Entity-based meaning, especially in the context of chess, there's the kind of kid who says, I won that game because I'm good, or he's better than me, right? Like basically thinking of himself as a certain entity with certain limits. Whereas the dynamic thinker would say, I won that game because I studied for many hours, or I didn't try my best, so I lost the game. And the basic point with those kind of thinkers, of course there are strengths and weaknesses to both, but what he was saying was it tends to be, especially in the world of chess, that dynamic thinkers, they tend to be much, much stronger players. Because if a kid says, I'm good, inevitably there's going to come that time when they fail, they lose. And so after that, you've kind of shattered their glass, and they don't really know how to recover. Whereas the dynamic thinker, oh, okay, I lost that game, but if I work hard next time, I can get stronger. So to make a long story short, there's no denying that Japanese people as a whole are overwhelmingly entity-based thinkers. And I was outlining those kind of points again in my herbivores video. If you if you know anything about Japanese society, they really want to judge things on a kind of a surface level. They want to know exactly, if it's big, if it's strong. They want to know what it is in advance. That way they can react to it properly in advance. So, yes, that's completely how they think. I'm good at this, I'm bad at this, etc. Now, what I learned from living there, living in Japan for the most part, is that the heart of this whole entity-based thinking specifically revolves around risk management. There's a reason that they want to assign values to basically people, to situations, to everything in life, and it revolves around cutting down their risk. So, for example, if you already deem that something is stronger than you, then if you don't fight it, you're not a coward, if you know what I mean. Like, if you run away when you see a tiger, you're a smart person, because there's no way you're going to beat that tiger. In much the same way, that's kind of how I noticed a lot of Japanese would react to situations. They would say, okay, that's stronger than what I can do. I'm not even going to step into that situation. Or, this is how this situation is. Of course I can do that no matter what. And they won't give up in that situation. So, especially, that's why they think in those kind of terms. They want to plot out their risk in almost every situation before it happens. Now, again, I've got about 1 million different stories I could tell about observing this kind of risk aversion behavior. But what sticks with me most was that classroom behavior when I was, teaching English in Japan. When a lot of students would desperately want to know their number. They would want to know, like, what level am I? Am I level 2? Am I level 3? And, I discussed this before, but, it was a really funny situation, because I was always telling them, your number doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if I tell you you're level 3, you're level 4, you're level 5. It doesn't matter. What matters is when you get into a classroom to try your best. When you get into a classroom to listen carefully, even if you're level 7, even if you're level 1, the process to get better is still the same, so it doesn't really matter. And they're like, yeah, okay, really, what's my number? What's my number? That really just kind of like stuck to me. It's almost like trying to convince somebody to try and think in a dynamic way. And in a face-to-face way, they're like, oh, yeah, dynamic, that's good. Okay, what's the numbers? Enough of that bullshit. What's the number, So, let me give a quick aside about fighting. So I've studied and I've learned a lot about fighting and competition. And I'm not just talking about, like, MMA, boxing, K1. I'm talking about chess, fighting games, combat sports, basically everything. So basically for all of them, no matter how the fighting goes, every competitor falls somewhere on that grid between the technical and the emotional. If I use boxing for an example, some fighters really want to surge through, and they want to, like, overwhelm their opponents, right? What I would describe as the kind of emotional, hard-working side. And some fighters are very, very patient and very methodical, just waiting for good chances, not really risking anything. The technical, right? The technical side of things. And the technical and emotional side, they run through not just competition, but a lot of life, right? And, as I said, this runs through every form of competition. Sometimes you'll watch a boxing match, and it's a very technical match. Nobody's risking anything. They're just doing kind of what they have to do, and then somebody might capitalize on their opponent's mistake, which was just like an instant momentary mistake. On the other hand, the fights that we tend to like to watch are the much more emotional, where somebody's working hard, but they're not really technically sound. So a lot of times you'll have that situation where there's this big hulking fighter, and he's throwing this big looping punch, but that big looping punch is not technically correct. You know, metaphorically speaking, it's like that punch is screaming 2 + 2 = 3, you know, in a big, loud, intimidating voice. Now, if you're a cool, calm, technical boxer, you might see that situation, and with a cool head, you'll say, no, 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 2 + 2 = 4, my straight's going to beat that. Bam, I win. And, you know, Japanese people, and by extension Japanese fighters, or basically any person in competition, I cannot describe just how deeply they believe in the technical, often to the point of, you know, any kind of risk or taking chances, it's not even an option. You know, it's not even something they think about. It's just, you know, we have to do it this way, which can be frustrating, but it's just kind of how they are. You know, so again, it was like me as a teacher in the classroom, trying to get them to loosen up, you know, take risks, and not really worry about if what they're saying is technically perfect, and their response being something like, yeah, that's cute, what's my number, you know? But the more I kind of encountered that, attitude, the more it really felt like, you know, it wasn't just, you know, that's cute, what's my number? It's more like they were looking at me saying, yeah, right, taking chances, taking risks. Yeah, you do that. I'll be over here on the winning side. So it was just hard to kind of get them out of that. In fact, impossible in many situations. No matter how much I tried to kind of loosen them up, there are some students who just wouldn't loosen up because they wouldn't even consider loosening up an option, right? So, you know, now we've kind of arrived at the heart of it. And I really hope that I can kind of convey clearly the full weight of what I want to say. Why are Japanese so technical? Why will they not? Why will they not, for the life of them, take an unnecessary risk? Why do they need step-by-step instructions for showing emotions, for their own emotions? In my most heartbreaking moment in Japan video, I talked about a conversation I had with this old volunteer who was teaching me Japanese. Really, really great guy, and just an amazing conversation. In fact, you know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that was one of the best conversations I had in my life, because, you know, he blew my mind like about 3 or 4 times in just the space of like an hour or so. And the story that I told back in that heartbreaking moment video was that he told me that he had survived the bombing of Tokyo, and that he was the only kid in his class, in his elementary class, who had survived. And what blew me away about it was not only the fact that that's kind of an amazing story in and of itself. What blew me away was that he was laughing when he was saying that. You know, like he was just like it didn't really bother him so much as I'm sure it did, you know, many years ago. So that was one of the stories about that conversation that blew me away. But the other story that he told me, the other story that was, you know, in the same vein, was about his elementary school before the war. He told me that, you know, in pre-World War II Japan, which he was just alive long enough to know, in pre-World War II Japan, in elementary schools, he was literally taught by his teachers that Japan is the country of the gods. I don't know if he actually said Kami no Kuni, but maybe there's a term, something similar to that. Anyway, that's literally what he was taught in his school. He was taught that Japan is a special country. It's the country of the gods, and he was taught that the Emperor of Japan is a living god. That's not an exaggeration. That's literally what he was taught in his school, and he was telling me these stories about having been taught that. So I believe most people in the West who aren't major history buffs, even if you're not really aware of many things that happened during World War II, I think people are aware of the term kamikaze or kamikaze. Basically, the pilots who were so committed to their country that they willingly killed themselves just to take out a greater number of enemies. Which in and of itself you might think of as, that's a technical decision. That's a numbers-based decision. I kill myself, that means I kill 10, 20, 30 of the enemy. Again, that's a technical thing, not a quality-based thing. If this fighter lives for long enough, he can make decisions that are even more impactful. No, it's just this guy is one guy and he takes out 10 guys. But that's not even the heart of what I want to say. So as I said, most people know about kamikaze. What you might not know is that this kind of exchange your life for their life philosophy, it was not just for pilots. They would also teach ground soldiers to strap bombs to themselves and blow up one tank, exchanging their life for one tank. So the thing is, even if I explain all that out, and even if I outline all those things, there's no way I can really convey perfectly how just how much of a dagger it was, not even to the heart, but to the soul of the Japanese, when America not only blew a lot of Japan, the country itself, to pieces, and won the war, but most especially, I believe, was when the emperor was forced to announce, "I'm not a god," on the radio. So, on YouTube, I've watched a lot of those, creationist versus atheist videos, and no matter how far the debate goes, atheists will almost never convince hardcore Christians that there's no God. And it really doesn't matter what evidence they bring to the table, because the thing is, you can't prove there's no God. No matter what reasons, no matter what logic, there's no lab test that you can do that proves, unequivocally that there is no God. You can make arguments. You can you can debate it back and forth philosophically, but what it comes down to is, Christianity, even if you do give brilliant reasons why there is no God, it's still a faith-based religion. Still, that Christian person is going to say, oh, this person is just the devil in disguise trying to convince me not to believe in God. So this is one more test. It's okay, Lord, I'll pass your test. I'll believe in you even unto this, right? That's the problem with, the creationist versus atheist debate. No matter how much sense it makes, Christians will not be convinced. On the other hand, in Japan's case, you can prove that a person is not a god, right? At least insofar as to have that person who's supposedly divine actually telling you he's not divine. So, you know, the shoe's kind of on the other foot, right? So that's the thing that really it boils down to. You know, all of that fight, all of that sacrifice, and all of those young people, those young, really strong-hearted, you know, warriors that you know, history looks back on, you know, depending on which country, maybe through a different lens, but there's no denying that if you're going to, you know, sacrifice your life, you know, you've made the ultimate commitment. But those lives, those, you know, those, I would say, very brave lives, they were all thrown away, and they were all thrown away in the wrong cause. So I think that does something to you. I really do. I think that once that glass has been shattered, you know, there's no piecing it back together anymore. You know, after that, there's no more of this kind of happy, you know, Disneyland, wish upon a star bullshit. They believed that the emperor was a god. In fact, they were taught that since they were children. And it was proven to them that they were wrong. So, you know, I told the story of that one guy who survived the bombing when he was a kid. A different guy, another teacher of mine, another old teacher of mine. They tend to be old because it's a very simple job. Another old guy, he was telling me that he was a little boy, like maybe a baby during that time, but he had an older brother, and it was through that conversation with him that I learned the word dogu, which means tool. And he was telling me that, you know, now that he looks back on history, his brother, who did die in World War II, was basically just treated as a dogu, was just treated as a tool, and he's really regretful, of course, about that. And I think that, you know, many Japanese are the same way. There's just no... There's just no way to reconcile that comfortably. They, like I said, those young people, they threw their lives away, and they threw their lives away in the wrong cause. But the thing is, they believed in it. They believed in it to the very, very edge. They used their heart. They used their emotions to the very, very edge, and it was proven wrong. So, I think that what we're kind of left with is that these days, I think honestly, belief is a hard subject for Japanese people to kind of come face to face with. You know, whether they consciously think so or not. I know this happened, you know, in the 1940s, but of course, I still do think it has great repercussions even to today. The two major religions that are in Japan are Buddhism and Shintoism. But if you know, really sit down with a Japanese person and say, do you believe in Shintoism? Do you believe there are little spirits, you know, in the forest, in the trees, in the water, in the rice? Do you believe that? Probably most of them will say no. And again, if you ask them, do you believe in Buddhism? Do you believe that there is, you know, something called nirvana? Do you believe there is some, you know, mystical Buddha who, you know, watches over you, or, you know, that has existed for, you know, all these years? Do you believe that? And if you really sit them down face to face, I think most of them will say no, I don't believe that. You know, but you really don't have to believe in something deeply to enjoy its trappings. You know, like, you don't have to be a hardcore Christian to have fun at Christmas. You know, you don't have to be, whatever, whatever the origins of Halloween are, you don't have to be like some weekend to, to put on a goofy costume and go to a Halloween party. In much the same way, I think that's kind of the state that many Japanese are in now. They go to shrines. They go to shrines for weddings. They go to temple. They pray to their ancestors. They light candles. They light incense. Even though, honestly speaking, I don't think a lot of them believe to the core that Buddhism or Shintoism are really real. So, in short, that's why I think many Japanese people act the way they do. It's been a long time in the making. It's been several centuries of history in the making. But now they're in the opposite position of Christians. A Christian will stretch out his faith to the farthest edge because you can never prove that his God doesn't exist. For Japanese people, on the other hand, to get them up, to get them to take a risk, you have to prove to them that there's something to believe in. So, I think that, to this day, the young generation, they're in a very strange position. I've talked before about, herbivore guys, grass eaters, soul shokuke. I've talked about, parasite singles, those kind of things. There really is this whole, dichotomy between the young and the old. The old, they've made so many sacrifices for the young, just to get them to survive in this day and age. And the young, it's so hard for them, I think, to understand where the old are coming from. Because, if you're a kid, you have this natural positivity to you. You have this natural energy to you. And I think a lot of them are kind of confused as to why the older generation doesn't really have that. Why the older generation is always telling them to slow down, take risks, plan, or not take risks, plan everything out and be totally safe with everything you do. And they do it with this kind of funeral-like seriousness. One time, I had the fortune to win a contest, a poetry contest in my university. I won a contest for a haiku, and, I was just, kind of happy-go-lucky. I really put a lot of, effort into it, but, my natural reaction was to be happy, when I won it. And then when my teacher was giving me the award, the whole atmosphere that came over was almost like a funeral, It was almost like, we have to take things seriously. Here I am presenting you with the award for this, great achievement and, poetic success. And I'm like, oh, cool, I just had kind of a goofy attitude. And, a lot of things in Japan are like that. You have this young generation, and they just have this natural energy to them. And I think a lot of them, they're kind of puzzled, and they're kind of disappointed in the older generation who just will not take any kind of risk, will not show any kind of emotion. And I think that they need them to. As I said, it's unbelievably hard to get over something like that. Because everything that you believed in was kind of, slap back in your face. And so, of course, you don't want to come out. You don't want to take risks anymore. I understand that. I'm kind of getting older myself. I understand the mentality, but at the same time, it's like, if you just get up, go outside your house, run, 1 or 2 laps, and your heart starts beating. And your heart just starts beating faster, the sweat's coming off of you. And, if you're having fun with that, that to me is meaning in and of itself. That to me is, I think, what older Japanese should be living for is just the the fun of life itself, for the fact that we're alive. It's really hard to kind of get that message across even to them, because what they've believed in has been shattered. But I think that the young generation really kind of needs them to do that. I think sometimes the atmosphere in Tokyo is just unbelievably oppressive, and it's ironic, because I know why they're doing it. I know why the older generation is so serious. But as I said, that old guy, the one for whom opened my eyes to a lot of these ideas, he was so Genki. He had gotten over it. And you might think of that story that I told where he was laughing about the people who were killed around him. That didn't come across to me at all as callous. It surprised me at first, but you have to be there face to face to understand exactly how he was doing it. He wasn't being a callous, who cares about life, kind of attitude. He had just accepted it on a fundamental level, and he moved on. And I know that it's really hard, but I think that you can. No matter what happens, if your heart's beating, then yeah, you can move on. Anyway, that's kind of what I think. That's why I think many Japanese kind of are the way they are. If I've missed anything, if there's any clarifications, if there's anything you want to say, please, by all means, I welcome comments. So, 見てくれてありがとうございます。さようなら。